Have you ever felt a laugh just catch in your throat, That moment where it turns into something a little more unsettling? Well, today we're diving headfirst into that exact feeling with Harold Pinter's masterpiece, The Birthday Party. This is the play that basically perfected a genre known as the Comedy of Menace. So let's explore how Pinter takes a simple party and turns it into a full-blown psychological trap.
So our story kicks off in probably the most ordinary place you can imagine, a sleepy, kind of run-down seaside boarding house. It's quiet, a little bit forgotten, and it's home to a guy named Stanley Webber. He's a man whose life has really just stalled out in this monotonous, isolated routine. But as you can guess, that quiet life is about to get completely shattered. All of a sudden, two men, Goldberg and McCann, show up out of nowhere. They're sharply dressed, their banter is just bizarre, and their presence immediately cranks up the tension in the room to an 11.
And right away, this brings us to the absolute core mystery, the one question that just hangs over the entire play. What on earth do these guys want? They seem to know Stanley, or at least know of him, but their motives are a total mystery. And just like that, we're thrown into this terrifying game of cat and mouse that is as confusing as it is scary.
You know, this strange mix of the totally normal with the deeply threatening, it actually has a name. This is what critics call the Comedy of Menace, and it's the perfect way to describe that deeply unsettling feeling when your laughter just turns to fear.
So, what is Comedy of Menace, exactly? Well, the term itself was coined by a critic named Irvin Wardle. He used it to describe this unique style, especially in Pinter's early work, that masterfully mixes humor with this constant, creeping atmosphere of threat. I love this description. Think of it as comedy with its teeth bared.
So how does Pinter actually create this feeling? Well, he has a recipe. He starts with a completely normal setting, but you can feel this tension just simmering under the surface. Then he drops in these mysterious characters with really murky motives. And the dialogue, it's just filled with ambiguity. All this leads to these sudden, jarring shifts, where a normal conversation can turn deeply threatening in a split second. The whole thing is designed to keep you, the audience, permanently off balance.
Now you might be thinking, hey, isn't this just like theater of the absurd? And that's a really great question. They're definitely related, but there's a key difference. The theater of the absurd tends to focus on the big, philosophical idea that life itself is meaningless. But the Comedy of Menace, Pinter's territory, is much more grounded. It really zooms in on the hidden violence and the power struggles that can erupt in our very own everyday lives.
So who was the mastermind behind all this anxiety? Let's take a moment to meet the man himself, Harold Pinter.
Pinter was born in London in 1930, and he wrote The Birthday Party pretty early in his career, back in 1957. Of course, he went on to write other masterpieces, like The Caretaker, and his incredible body of work eventually earned him the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2005. His style really did change modern drama forever, mostly by showing us just how much can be said by not saying anything at all.
And that leads us perfectly into his signature style, the Pinteresque, a style that is all about the incredible, overwhelming power of what isn't said. Just take a look at this line from Stanley. The words themselves are simple enough, but look at that, the pause. In a Pinter play, a pause isn't just taking a breath. Oh no, it is a moment absolutely loaded with unspoken tension. It's a character actively dodging an uncomfortable truth. It's a whole universe of meaning packed into a tiny moment of silence. And Pinter was so specific, he actually had different tools for this. A pause, like we just saw, is all about that surface-level tension, that avoidance. But a silence, well, that's a whole other level. A silence in Pinter often points to a much deeper emotional conflict, a hidden fear that's just too big to put into words. He uses both to create this incredible unspoken world beneath the dialogue. Pinter himself called this combination of sounds, silences, and the claustrophobic setting the texture of the play. And that word just perfectly describes his goal, to create this oppressive world that has no structure, no security. That boarding house isn't just a location, it's a trap, and you can feel the walls closing in on the characters. Okay, so we've got the unsettling vibe, we've got the cryptic dialogue, but what is this play really about? Let's start peeling back the layers and unpack the deeper allegory going on here. So one of the most powerful interpretations is that these characters are all symbols. Stanley represents the individual, maybe an artist, who has tried to check out of society. And Goldberg and McCann, well, they're the forces of authority, the system that shows up to punish anyone who dares to not conform. You have to remember, this was written just over a decade after World War II, so this theme really hit home in an era still grappling with the horrors of totalitarianism.
And the symbolism, wow, it goes even deeper, right down to the everyday objects in the play. The mirror that Stanley looks into suggests his shattered sense of self. The toy drum he's given feels like a cruel reminder of his lost innocence. And when McCann literally rips a newspaper into strips, that's a powerful, violent symbol for the destruction of truth itself.
You know, Stanley's struggle puts him in some pretty famous company. His situation echoes characters like Joseph K. from Kafka's The Trial, who's persecuted by a bizarre legal system he can't even understand, or Winston Smith from Orwell's 1984, who's just completely crushed by the state. It's a timeless story, the individual versus a faceless, oppressive system.
Pinter himself actually gave us a huge clue about all this in his Nobel Prize lecture. He said, "Truth in drama is forever elusive. You never quite find it, but the search for it is compulsive." And that tells you so much. The play isn't just a story, it's a commentary on how truth itself can be twisted, bent, and ultimately broken by people in power.
So the play's most intense moments become these powerful metaphors. That relentless, nonsensical interrogation of Stanley and the chaotic, terrifying party that follows, they aren't just things that happen. They actually symbolize a total psychological breakdown, the systematic destruction of a person. And the final takeaway from all of this is, well, it's chilling. At the end of the play, a completely broken Stanley, who can't even speak anymore, is dressed in a suit and just led away by his tormentors. It is a stark, devastating image of the complete and total loss of personal freedom.
And all this leaves us with one final lingering question. Pinter wrote this play in 1957, but these themes feel incredibly relevant, don't they? So where do we see the comedy of menace playing out in our own world today? Maybe in the subtle threats, the ambiguous language, the strange power dynamics hidden just beneath the surface of our own ordinary lives? Something to think about.